Hi everyone. We are back. A little bit of a delay between these. I was up at my mom's cottage and had a nice time. And we're back at it though. So where we left off, we got routing working last, and at least like in its most basic sense. So for instance, we made an app router that uses Go Router. It's a Serverpod provider, and then we set up these things called branches because we want to have tabs in our app essentially like this. I did get a comment that at the end of the video, my phone, I guess my face was blocking my phone like this, so no one could see all the goodiness. But this is kind of what we got working now, just our different branches here, which just comes from our app container. Now, before the stream, I was taking a look at this and I realized there's something really weird going on. Like this app bar is really big, and I proved it by going into the one of these screens and just put a container that's red, and you'll see like it's not taking up the whole room. So there might be other ways to fix this, but I fiddled with an idea that seems to work fine. Instead of returning a column here, we're going to return a scaffold. And inside the scaffold, we're going to make the body the navigation shell. And at least at this point, we don't have to worry about having it being expanded because it's automatically going to take up as much space. And then what we're going to do is actually make our bottom navigation bar our navigation bar. So we're going to grab all this and put it here. And then we'll get rid of this column and all that stuff because we don't need it anymore. And now if we refresh, we're actually going to see that we are good. This is now looks a little more like an expected tab bar. And we can flick between these and everything's cool. So yeah, so that's kind of what's going on there. And because I couldn't show this, I just want to explain again. Basically, we have in our app router, we have this stateful shell route.index stack, which allows us to have multiple, essentially like stacks of views. And inside there, we have these different branches. And we created these just within each feature. We made something called post routes and so on and so forth, which ultimately has a branch. We could, of course, have just put this all in our router, but I like this organization of just kind of having everything here. And the idea is we would have multiple routes that are relevant to posts within here and ones with venues inside the venue one and so on and so forth. Then inside our app container, we are essentially passing in the navigation shell. And we'll see that in, I believe, main.dart. Yeah, we have our, oh, no, we don't. We have the router. We're using we're using a material app.router now. And if we actually look at our router like this, we'll actually see we have our login route here. We're going to have some other routes like our register and so on and so forth. But then we have this index stack, which has our post routes and all this kind of things. And we've set our initial thing to the post routes namespace, which is really just this /feed thing that we're going to eventually use. So that's kind of what's going on there. And then yeah, this app container is basically because in our router, we are using a builder on this where we return the app container and pass in the navigation shell. So our app container is basically able to use that. And then we just have something when you click on, when you click on one of these tabs, it's going to change this selected index, this current index here. And it will also change the destination and push you there. So you're kind of seeing this going and it's all good. Obviously, we'll have different icons here. We're also going to have a fifth button when we get to that to actually create various things, posts and whatnot. But this is good enough for now to get started. So there's a bit of a review. I'm just going to get rid of this lovely green that we have, which is done right here. I'll just get rid of the whole body and we'll be back and ready to go. Okay, so what do we want to do next? So there's still more to do in auth. Like we don't have everything fleshed out for registering. That's something we'll get to soon, but I kind of want to move on from auth. I think we have enough that we can, at least start making something. And we'll come back to that, in a future video. I want to do something a little more fun, a little more, getting dirty with Serverpod kind of thing. So what I want to do is actually create what we're going to be doing in our Explore tab. We're going to start with that. Because it's a big part of everything. Basically, Explore is going to be listing all the venues that exist in our open mic app. At first, it'll just be a list view, but we'll also eventually add a map view so you can kind of see what's close and nearby. But we need that venue model because events are going to rely on a venue. They're going to be part of a venue, as well as even our feed. We're going to allow posts to be attached to either a venue or an event. So thus, I think this is the most logical model to do first. So we're going to go back to Serverpod side. So you see I'm using that Peacock plugin that lets me change my VS Code color. So I'm using like this dark green when we're in backend and blue in the Flutter side. So just keeps things a little bit more simple and not confusing. So back in Serverpod, we have made one custom model already. If you remember, inside models, we made our user.spy.yaml. And again, .spy just means Serverpod YAML and just allows your IDE, if you have the right extension installed, the Serverpod extension, you actually get the nice color coding and IntelliSense and linting and all that kind of stuff. So that's all that means. It would still work with .yaml, but you might as well do .spy because you get this pretty stuff. So we're going to make a new model, and we're going to call it venue.spy.yaml. And let's just have these open side by side to remember how this works. But we want to give it a class, and we're going to call it venue. I just like the word. For table, again, we're going to use venue, singular. You could call this anything, technically. You could call it, foo-bars, but that's going to be really confusing in the future when you're like, why do I have a table in my database called foo-bar? So just make it the same name, lowercase, and not plural, just by convention. Now, for our fields, these will actually be a bit simpler. We kind of did something a little complicated over here. We had some indexes. Part of me fought over, like, do we want to even do this one first? Because it's a little more confusing than I think what you're going to see here. But I did, fight it for a bit and decided, no, we need to get our custom user made so that, we can do all this stuff properly. So fields, let's remember what our venue has. So I have this thing that I showed in the first video, and I think we pulled up a few times of what our app will look like. So in Explorer, we're going to have a list of venues, and a venue is going to have a name, it's going to have a primary asset, it's going to have an address. Apparently, short address twice. That was probably just a mistake. Let's get rid of that. We might have a follow button and various other things. So let's start kind of figuring that out. So we'll start with name. That's a pretty logical thing. It'll be a string, and we want to use uppercase, just is following, how you would do something in Dart. We're going to have something called primary asset. So this is essentially the image, and we might want to call it primary image. In fact, yeah, let's just call it primary image to keep it simple. And we'll call it primary image URL because we're going to be storing all of our URLs as, or all of our images as just URLs, reference to a remote URL that's going to be stored on S3 eventually. So this will also be a string. And I realized, look, because I'm using .spy, I'm seeing these things. And yeah, we should be using actually camel case, not snake case. So we'll do that, primary image URL. We want to have let's have a short address. So this would just be like, to me, if it's like the address without like the zip code and the country and the province, because the way this app's going to work is you're going to be, viewing stuff in a specific hub, and a hub is the idea of like a region, kind of like it would be like a city or maybe like a district or a region, so like a fairly large area but not huge. So I don't think we have to like every time you see a venue on the map or whatever, you have to see the whole address, like just knowing like the number and the street, and maybe the town if it's a larger area. That's probably enough. So we'll just call it short address. Let's have a website. A website URL. Let's just call it that. And we can actually, how do we want to do this? Yeah, I think in general we're not going to allow anything null. We'll just use empty strings. That's at least my thought right now. Just to make the database schema a little bit simpler and not have to do as many null checks. We can just check for is empty. I think that's what we'll do. We can always change that after. Also, we're going to have an Instagram handle. I feel like a big, in terms of doing verification and stuff, like I think Instagram is going to be sort of the core place to go. And the reason for it is like, at least in like, whether it's open mics, music events, that kind of stuff, like that's usually like their primary place that they're posting stuff, that they're like marketing, as opposed to like their own website or even like Facebook these days. So I think like this is kind of like something we're going to, not enforce, but if you want to become verified, and we're going to like verify, venues and stuff like that, we will want, Instagram to be kind of the thing, and it's a place, to bring people to. Website URL as well as an option, but we're gonna have Instagram. Speaking of, let's have is verified, and that would be a Boolean. So we just do bool like Dart, verified. I'm gonna probably have that lower. So we have IG handle, bio. That's a good one. Maybe that even should be like up here. This is like the description, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, we can have full address. Maybe we'll call it long address, or maybe we'll call it address long, and then address short. Okay. Um, um, yeah, we're not going to have something called map. That's just like the way to get to it. But in that case, we should be storing like a latitude and longitude. I'm not sure if the Serverpod is a way to store like what's called a point field or like geo data. But we can store it pretty safely with just like latitude and have a double, and longitude as a double as well. All right, cool. Event list, post list. Okay, that's at least enough for us to kind of get going, I think. The only other thing I'm thinking is a venue will also need an owner, as in like the user that created it, because this is obviously like going to be a, user-generated content app. So I think we're going to put that too. So we'll put that right at maybe at the bottom. I might move it up. And for this, we're actually going to essentially tie it to our user like this. So we're not going to tie it to user info. We're going to tie it to the user itself. And I believe for this, we still need to say relation. And we have to do this to make it technically nullable. And that's just the way that Serverpod works. And I think it's mostly because the Dart object should, even if it doesn't, if it hasn't been saved to the database yet, it can't really have an owner. It can't have a relationship until after. So we'll just do that. I believe that's all we need for now. I'm going to move owner up to the top. Most of our models, I think, are going to have that, so let's just keep it up there. I also like having things like Boolean, like flags, essentially, is verified, is unlisted, is deleted, all that kind of stuff. I like to have those at the bottom. This is personal preference. Okay, so we have this now. The next thing I want to do is actually run serverpod generate. So we're going to run it, serverpod generate. So this right here is just going to generate the code that, that our client has in order for these two things to talk to each other. However, we also need to generate database migration. So we'll do serverpod. I think it's create migration, create-migration. Yep. So we'll see here now, if we go to our migrations folder right here, our latest one, if we go to the migration.json, we're going to see there is a create table called venue, and here's all the fields that essentially we made. Yay, there we go. Okay, so now that we've created the migration, we have to run the migration. And we can do that by just running Dart, and it's in bin main.dart, and then we can do -- apply migrations, like this. So it applied it, and it started it up. One pro tip, I guess, is let's say you wanted to apply the migrations but not actually start the server. You can run the same command, but then I think it's -- role role maintenance. I'll just copy that because it's hard read to type. And what this will do, it'll do the same thing. It'll run your migrations. It'll apply it to your database, but it won't run the server after. And this is really helpful if, for one, you don't want to run your server, but especially if you're doing any kind of like CI/CD where you want to run the migration against your database, but you don't want the server to just like hang there and run. So it's just -- role maintenance, and it'll work the same way. Okay, so let's actually start our server. Might as well. All right. Let's go back to Flutterland, and let's close this route here. And let's go to our venue. We have a venue routes, which goes to the venue route screen. We're going to do a little bit of like temporary work in here, because one thing we need to do is I need to actually create a venue, and we're just going to do it kind of like how we did with auth and registering, just creating like a button that's going to like create something with hard-coded data. That way we can then not worry about all the creating UI and all that first. We can just get things like lists and stuff working. So let's get that started. The first thing we're going to need is we're going to need a service. We're going to call this venue service.dart. And let's just open up I think we have an API service, a user, let's just find this. Yeah, user service. Let's look at this as reference. So here we're going to have something called venue, and I'll make this a little bigger, venue service. And again, we're going to have to pass in our client so that it can actually talk. This is the client that lets us essentially talk to Serverpod via its API. And for its constructor, we're going to require this to be passed in. So this .client, just like that. Then let's have we'll start with the create because we need something before we're going to start listing. So we'll do the same kind of thing. We're going to use fpdart. We're going to have an either. It's going to return a string if there's an error. If not, it's going to return a newly created venue, which sometimes is tricky to get the autocomplete on. If you open up usually like the client folder and go into a couple things, sometimes you'll actually start to get this back. But we're not seeing it yet, but we'll just kind of continue this on. We need 2 of those, and we'll just call this create. Like this, it'll be asynchronous. And let's see if we can get this. All right, we're not getting it yet. Let's solve that problem. Let's go in here into our protocol. Let's see if it's even in here. Yeah, I see the word venue, so let's try and open that file. So now we have it open, and I believe now we will get we have the autocomplete now. So what I've noticed about this, at least I'm pretty sure, is when you're running it in the way that we've kind of set this up, where we have a VS Code tab for our server and a VS Code tab or window, I guess, for our Flutter app, the generator doesn't really trigger like VS Code to be like, hey, there's this new thing here. So you shouldn't have this problem if you're just running it all together. But running it separately, yeah, what I've noticed, rather than just restarting your Dart interpreter or like VS Code in full, just try and find like that file by what I kind of did. I went in here and then I went into the protocol and then I saw this venue one and I opened this, and as soon as I did that, it automatically recognized it. And it's still, it didn't have to import anything new. As long as you have like this, you're good. So importing this or any other model should solve that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we're gonna have our create. And the way create is going to work is we're actually going to pass a venue up that we want to create. And in fact, I'm going to call this save, and you'll see why in a bit. Okay, now in order to save this, we'll wrap this in a try catch, and we're just going to do something called v. We could call it, yeah, we'll just do v for a minute. And what we want to do is await client dot, and this is where we have to now hit our API. Now we haven't created that yet, so let's go back to the server side and get that going. So in source endpoints, we're going to make a new endpoint called venue endpoint .dart, and this is where everything to do with our venues will be. So we'll do venue endpoint extends endpoint, and we need to have a function in here. So let me just remember how this works. Yeah, it's going to be a future, and it's going to return a venue. In theory, something might go wrong, so we might not get anything back. So we can say that. And we're going to call this, we're going to have one for create. And its first parameter always is going to be, on endpoints, have to be session. If for some reason you're not seeing code auto-generating, this is a common error. Like you forgot to put this parameter. It won't actually generate an endpoint if you miss this. It'll omit it completely. And then the second thing will be a venue itself. It'll be asynchronous. And here, we really just need to go await venue, the model itself, not this, because we're going to talk to a static method, .db, I think it's insert row, and here we have to pass in the row, which is going to be this venue here. Now we can actually go v, this looks kind of similar to the client-side code, and that's kind of cool. So here we get back a venue. Oh, it looks like it always will be this, but I imagine something could go wrong, so we're going to wrap this still in a try catch. And then maybe print out the error. Eventually we'll get into logging and we'll be able to do this a little bit prettier. And in this case, we'll just return null. So we have our v here, very good. And really then we can just return this to conform to our future venue. Now let's copy this because we also are going to do one to update essentially, because you might want to create something and then make a change to it. So we're going to have update where we're going to still pass in the venue. And here we're going to do, it's not insert row, but update row. And we pass in the same thing. And it's going to be smart enough to know, okay, cool, there was an ID on this, I'm going to use this. Which gets me thinking, like maybe we can simplify this for our integration. Let's actually change this to say save. Okay? And what we can do in here is we can go if venue.id does not equal null. That means we know it already exists in our database. And we can actually run this command where we just update it. If not, we can run the insert. So that means I can get rid of this and just change this to save. All right, cool. So we've made a change to our server-side code, meaning for that reason, we have to restart a server no matter what if we've made changes. However, because we've also created a new endpoint, we need to actually do a generate. So let's run the serverpod generate command first. We don't do a database migration. Nothing's changed with our database. Everything's good there. Let's just get this going. Now we will run it. We don't have to apply migrations or anything. Let's just run our server again. OK, so now back on the Flutter side, we can follow that same thing. And in fact, we already kind of are. We have save here. And we can just go venue equals await client. Now we have to go into the namespace, which, again, I don't think we have the generation. So let's try and solve this again. Serverpod client. One of these will get us our new thing. Maybe just opening venue. We'll figure it out. Client dot. Yeah, we're still not getting that. Okay, so let's see. Let's make some stuff a bit smaller. Serverpod client. Let's find the stuff for the endpoints. Where does, okay, let's find out, yeah, where this comes from. This one right here. You know, I think even just opening this is going to be enough because now I see the endpoint there. I bet you we're good now. Client.venue. Yeah, it is kind of an annoying thing. And again, you can get around it, I believe, just by running everything in the same window. I just like kind of keeping these things separated, just simpler in my head. So here we would just do save, and we pass in that venue. So there we go, venue. Yep, it could be null. So here we want to just go if v equals null, we'll return left. And in this case, I don't really know what the error would be. So we can just say an error occurred, or like, let's be a little more, a little better about it. Let's say couldn't save venue. Otherwise, we're just going to return right with the v right there. We know this isn't null anymore, so we know we're good. Now there could be an error. So in this case, we can just return return left of the e.toString and actually return something that Serverpod might tell us. Although I don't think it will tell us anything because if we looked at our code again, we're just returning null here, not even a string. I think, yeah, in that case, we kind of just have to use the same kind of thing here. I don't think we're going to have anything more logical. We'll have to review our logs and see what went wrong. OK, cool. What do we got next? What do we got next? So now we have the ability to save a venue. OK, cool. That's a good start. Let's get one in our database. So to do this, a couple things we have to do. We don't ever want to talk to the venue service specifically. We need a provider so that we can work with it properly. So we're going to call this venue service provider .dart. And we're going to try something a little bit new here that I realize we can probably do. So let's actually open up the router, our app router. So I want to kind of do it with the generator, but just for a provider. And this seems to be the way to do it. So we can open this up. We're going to do @riverpod like this, although that gave us, actually, that's kind of what we want, I guess. And what we want to return from here is ultimately our venue service. OK. And for some reason, we have two of these guys. OK, so venue service, and this will be venue service ref right here. And we just call this venue service, I believe, because it will automatically add the provider. And let's just look at our auth provider, for instance, our auth service provider, because we're essentially trying to do the same thing as this, but with the generator. So here we would just return auth service, or sorry, not auth service, but venue service, and we're going to pass in the client, and that we get from ref.read client provider. Okay, so we'll do that. Now for this, we need to also have say that this is part of a file, or that another file is part of this, and we'll just use venue service provider.g.dart. Okay, so we're going to save that. Now we're seeing all these lovely things here. I also think the Riverpod thing didn't get imported properly. Let's just grab that from Riverpod annotation, put it right at the top. There, now we at least have that. So we have some errors, and that's because we have to run the generator on this. So again, we can run our generator, just by, I like this build runner extension, and we'll just get it to hopefully load, find our project, click play. And this will just run that command, so I don't have to remember what that command is. And this should generate a sibling file right here. As it did. Okay, cool. So if we actually look at this file, we should see in here something called venue service provider right there. Awesome. All right. So now, and what's this saying? So now we're getting this error. This is interesting. This is why I wanted to do this. So we're getting this error that's essentially saying generators should only depend on other generator providers. So I am at some point going to just refactor we have a few providers that aren't generator providers, and then that will fix this. And that's what I'm starting to do here. I'm using it this way because I realized this is how we actually could auto-generate just a regular provider. So there we go. We'll fix that at some point. It's fine. Okay, so now that we have that in place, let's go to our venue root screen right here. And in our body, let's just do a center. We'll do a child of an app or an elevated button. And it will have an onPressed event, and it will have a child, and it'll just be like text create venue. Now again, this is just temporary because we're going to hard code some data in here just to make sure everything's working, rather than going through all the effort of building a form and all that stuff and typing out stuff and to realize something's wrong. So this is a nice debugging feature here. Okay, so to create a venue, it's kind of fun. We're just going to go venue equals venue. And here we get all the things we have to put in here, which is cool. So let's just kind of make this a little bit more readable. And owner ID, okay, that one is, we have to figure out what that is. I think the person I'm logged in as, oh, actually I realized one thing we could fix to make this, can this be null? No, it can't. It has to be, let's just do 0 for now. Let's just fix this real quick because I actually meant to do this a little bit differently. We always want, we don't want someone passing up, you know, oh, I'm the owner of this. You could just, you know, it could just make it so that you could just make a venue and it's owned by someone else and like there's problems with that. We want to rely on this session to actually create that. So when inserting, we are going to kind of like override some stuff here. So what we can do is we can just make, let's just make something called V again, and we'll maybe rename this. Or let's get the user first. So user we can get by just going session dot, we do this somewhere else, session dot authenticated. Yeah, there's our authentication info. Right, it is, I'm just going to do this right at the start actually. So we want to get our authentication info. That's cool. And essentially like, this is an endpoint that we want to restrict. If you're not logged in, like you can't hit this. So we'll just return null if this is the case. All right, so then we can actually get our user just like this. Now we don't necessarily need all this, we don't need the user info necessarily. I think we can just work with this right here. So we'll get user where we'll grab this right here. We will be making this a something we can recycle and reuse throughout our project, but I'm just kind of doing it verbosely right now. So here we go, and technically user could be null, so we should also say if user does not equal null, or if user equals null, we'll just return null. And just for our logging purposes, again, we're going to do better logging at some point, but this is fine for now. User was null, and this we can just say authentication info was null. That way, at least in our logs, we can kind of see what the heck went on. So what I want to do is when we're inserting, we want to go session dot, or sorry, not session. We want to take the venue. And what's cool with Serverpod, we already get a copy with. That's some of this code that they generate. So we can actually just override this to say owner ID specifically is going to be user.id. Sorry, we want to use the user.userinfo ID. They should, in theory, be the same, but we're going to rely on that as our main, identifier. Because yeah, let me just look at the user model again. Yeah, it might, based on our stuff, it might be a little different. We're going to use the user info ID. For the owner, although I don't think we have to pass this in, but we can actually just pass user here. Okay, cool. So there we go. We have this thing. Now in the updating, we also want to kind of do a check. We want to make sure if venue dot owner ID, seeing the safest way to do this, does not equal user dot user info ID. We're just going to return null. Print user is not the owner of this venue. We're going to make this a lot better at some point and make it really reusable, but this is kind of the approach. So for review, we'll get the authenticated information when we're trying to save. If we don't have any, like, we just go, no, you don't have permission to do this. Otherwise, we go and get the user, and if for some reason that user doesn't exist, okay, we say, no, that user doesn't exist. Then if we're doing an update, we want to make sure like the authenticated user has permission to do so. And this is essentially what this is doing. We're just checking to make sure that it is that person and everything's good. And if not, we get out of here. For inserting, we already know they're authenticated, we're cool, and we just make sure that we set this here. So that's kind of what I want to do. Now for this, we do have to restart our server. However, we don't actually have to rerun our generator. This code, because we restart our server, will run with the latest version. The only time we have to regenerate in this case would be, say we change this where we wanted them to also pass up like some random other variable, or the name of this changed, or the return type changed. That's where we'd actually have to rerun the generator so that the client can build the right bridge. All right, wicked. So now we have that going. So we can do something, and again, this is temporary, so I don't mind. So let's just call this my cool bar. Primary image URL, we're just going to have it as empty. Bio, we'll say come and hang. Address short, 123 Fake Street. Long would be something like 123 Fake Street. And Springfield, Oregon, USA. Is that the Oregon short form? Who knows? Website URL, let's just put something google.com. And Instagram URL, instagram.com/ I'll use my name. Cool. Latitude and longitude. Let's actually just put something kind of real in here. I'm just going to do the Toronto lat long, just to get something pretty accurate. So we'll grab this as the latitude, 43 point whatever. Now for this, we actually have to do negative because it's saying west. Longitude, if it's east, will be positive. Otherwise, it's negative. Is verified? Sure. Let's actually make it unverified for now, and then we can always verify it. So now we've constructed a venue just locally, and we want to actually save it. So here we'll do our ref.read. Oh, we don't have access to ref. So let's actually just, for now, wrap this in a, we'll wrap it in a builder. We'll change the builder to a consumer, which is Riverpod's consumer widget builder. Ref. Now we have access to ref. Yay. So here we can now go ref.read, and we want to read our venue service provider. And here we will just call save. And we pass in that venue. Look, there we go. So let's just do some other testing here. We'll actually await this, make it asynchronous. And we'll just say final v equals this. And let's actually print out v when it's done. And let's also, I forget what that will look like. So let's make sure we also print v dot, oh shoot, this is not actually the venue yet. This is the result because we're using fp-dart. So we do need to go result.fold. If we have an error, we might do something, print the error. Cool. If there's a success, it means we actually have a venue. And actually, we'll call this v, so it's a different name. And here's where we want to do print v, and print v dot, let's print the ID. Because we want to just make sure like an ID actually was set on it, meaning it's saved correctly. All right. I'm just going to do a green arrow reload. I don't know if it was necessary, but can't hurt. Explore, that's where we should be. So we're going to create this venue. Let's make sure we have our logging ready. So I'm going to go to my debug console here, and on Serverpod we're good. Let's try this out. create venue. We got an error, couldn't save venue. Let's look at our Serverpod logs. Info, okay, it said authentication info was null. I guess I'm not logged in. I should be logged in. I can see, oh, right, you know what? I don't think I'm logged in. How do we get to our login screen? We got rid of it. So I'm not logged in, and that's why I can't do this. Let's figure that out real quick. All right. So we have a login screen. We can, for now, let's just do it really, really basically. We're going to put some actions here. We're going to put an icon button that is and we'll put an icon here that maybe, oops, icons dot, I think there's like a sign in or login or something. Login. And here we can just do context dot push to our login screen dot route. So now if we go here, or sorry, here, we should see this little login button. Now we can actually log in. I have to remember, I think it was Tyler 3. And we'll try logging in. Okay, we got rid of our success thing. Again, that's just whatever. We're fine. Okay, so I should be logged in now. Let's try it again. Couldn't save venue. What do we have now? Okay, insert or update on table venue violates the foreign key constraint of this. Okay. So something happened in here where, oh, you know what? Did we? I wonder if we, no, the ID was null. Yeah. Okay, so it says database exception insert or update on table venue violates foreign key constraint venue foreign key 0. Somehow, somehow our venue didn't get an ID. Is that what happened here? All right, so I made a small error. I found my error. We should actually, the owner is not a reference to the user info. It's a reference to actually the user itself. So I was passing in before user info ID, but yeah, it should just be the ID because that's the owner's reference to a user, not a user info, and I just made a silly mistake. When I tried again, we are good. We have a venue. So let's actually look at this in the database to make sure everything went well. I'm opening up dbeaver here, and we'll just go into our venue table. And you'll see, yeah, we have an ID. I don't know why it started at 3, but that's fine. Maybe because it attempted those other ones and something went wrong. Reference to that owner, and so on and so forth. So you'll see there's, everything's in here that we put in. That's great. Primary image URL, we did make it blank. That makes sense. Okay, so that's cool. And if we look in VS Code, we actually see that this was the errors we were having before, but we have this coming back, and we have an ID of 3. So now we have a venue in our database. Let's make a new one. My other bar, and we'll just do like 456, 456, and maybe we'll just like adjust this by a marginal amount in case we get this on a map. And let's make this one verified. You've been verified. Good for you. So let's just save that, and we'll go back to our simulator and go back to events, explore. Create another venue. Cool. We have another one, has a new ID. We are good. If I can figure out how to refresh this, refresh. There it is. So we have our other bar. Okay, so now we have some stuff to work with, which is cool. I am going to, just so we don't keep making venues by accident, we're just going to comment this out for now. And hurry for time. I guess quickly we can get a list working. Do we want to do that? For time. Yeah, we can quickly get a list working. So something I like to do for lists is we could, of course, just create a endpoint that's going to return all of our venues. However, imagine like there's 1,000, 1,000,000 venues in our database. We really have to, consider things like pagination. So let's get that part set up, at least to wrap up this video, at least on the back end of an approach that I like. Now, the real approach that I like, I've never been able to get working perfectly well or properly in Serverpod because it relies on using generics and auto-generating things with generics. There seems to be issues with it. I haven't had any luck. I know there was also a live stream of Craig from the Flutter team trying to get it to work, and he wasn't having any luck. But I have a good, elegant solution that is not, terrible. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another model, and it's going to be called venue list.spy.yaml. Now, this model is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be something that's stored in the database. It's just going to be a bunch of fields. So we're going to call it class venue list. And we're not going to put a table. Just by emitting table, it doesn't become a database object. It'll just be something we can essentially serialize. And for fields, we're going to have something called results. And results is actually going to be a list. So we can just do list of venue. The other thing we want is some other sort of paginated specific things. And what we can do is we can have a page called integer, or that is an integer, a count. And this is how many results exist in total. So let's actually do these. No, let's do this and then this. So this is the page we're on. We're also going to have something called num pages, and that's going to be the number of pages in that exist, and that will be an integer. And what else do we need? Limit. And that will be an int. So when we're calling it, essentially we can say, hey, we want this limit, or we want this, this sort of thing, and it will only return what we ask for at a particular page. So created this venue list, and now let's go and we have to do a generate here, but we won't have to do a database migration because this doesn't talk to our database. And now we're generated. We'll restart our server just so we don't forget. And we'll go back to our venue endpoint. And I'm going to get rid of my debugging stuff here. Again, we're going to clean this up. We're going to make something really reusable when we have a chance. But let's actually do this before saving. So here, this is actually going to return not a venue, but a venue list right here. And we'll just call it list. And of course, session. And then there's some parameters we're going to allow to pass in. Now what's cool is this is Dart, so we could just have, like we're doing here, just a ordered list of parameters, but we can also, have it in these braces here to make them optional and set defaults and all that kind of stuff, and make them, name parameters. So what we want to ask is, hey, what's the limit that you want to return? And if I'm on a certain page, maybe I want to get just 3, or I might want to get 100 per page. But let's just do limit of, let's make the default 10 when you're calling this. So we can change that later. Similarly, we can ask for a page. So we'll just have a page, and the default will be page 1. And that's good for now. Then let's go to our, let's actually get this back. So the first thing we want to do is we want to know how many are in the database in general. And we can do that by just making a variable called count. And here we're going to await our venue model, and we can go .db, just like we were doing before, .count. And we can actually just be like, give us all of them, give us all of them. And that'll give us a lovely count, which is cool. Then for results, we're just going to go final results equals await our venue.db .find. So find will allow us to essentially pass in various things. You'll see this will be a list of venues that we get back. First parameter is session. We have to pass in when we go find. Then we can do things like limit. Look, limit, and pass our limit in. That's how many I want to get back. Offset. Now here, because I want to deal with pagination in just like a simpler way from my API point of view of like page 1, page 2, page 3, we have to do a little bit of math here. And what we want to do is take whatever page we're on, multiply it by the limit, but then after all that, subtract the limit out, because we want, if you're passing in page 1 and the limit's 100, we don't want to start at 100. We want to subtract that 100 out so that we start at 0, and so on and so forth. So just simple pagination sort of stuff. Then, yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. Now we could make this a little bit better where we actually want to include in the user that created it, that kind of stuff. I'm not too worried about that now. We might find a need that we want to do that where we actually, include the user info. Actually, there probably will be a need for that. So let's just do it now. So we can do venue.include. And for this, we want to include the user or the owner right here. And here we just have to go user include. And I think that'll do it. So now we have these lovely results. Everything's cool. Now we don't want to return these as just like this, because we want to return a venue list. So here we would go return venue list. And here we pass in count as count. We've already calculated that. That's how many there are. Limit, we just pass back limit. Page, we pass back page. And results, we pass back those results that we made right there. I feel like I'm missing maybe one thing, number of pages. So that's just a handy thing for the client to know how many pages there are. And this is just a calculation we'll do where we'll take whatever the count is, we'll divide it by the limit, but then we actually have to get the seal of that, meaning round up, because even if the last page is just one result, it's still another page. And if we just did a round, we would miss out on that data, anything from like 1 to 4 overflowing. So we want to round up. That's how many pages. Okay, cool. So we'll do that. We will rerun our generator because we now have a new endpoint. And in the next video, we'll actually start working with a list and see how to kind of get this pagination working. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.